Mhm. I will be right back, guys. Just gonna do a quick run to the restroom. Not that any of you really were interested in knowing that, but I will be right back. Gonna refill the coffee or two. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. It's going to be a pretty straightforward talk in the sense that there's really not too many. It's not really complicated what needs to be done this time of the year, but it is incredibly important. And then also too, when we're about, I don't know, about halfway through or so, because I'm so proud of myself. I actually wrote myself some notes, which, if my fancy background, there we go, some notes here so I can actually be organized and such. But really, the big thing is I want to get to the Q&A, and I had someone actually email me a question. But what I've done here is just opened up the chat box so I can see that. And I mean, feel free if you want to put your questions in there now. My only concern is just if there's too much dialogue between now and when I get to the Q&A, your question might be lost further up in the stream, but whatever works for you. But anyway, quick video I do want to share. and that is, let's see here. Today we were actually just out. My poor guys, they went with the other truck to pick up the rest of our honey because this year we went and let's see here, get all this stuff out of the way. You are screen sharing. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Get that. We want Kenneth to feel a part of this. Here's the setup of my friends extracting. All right, so I thought I'd do a quick little video here. Here's my other boss one. And so this is their setup. It's a 60 frame Callan extractor, which is I think they even have 30 frame, but either 60 or 120 frame is kind of the standard way. And I don't know if any of you guys have seen these setups before. This is a pneumatically driven platform that pushes the frames out of the box onto this conveyor belt, which is chain driven, which drives the frames into this. This is the uncapper here. And we're in it has just been, this is an insanely busy time of the year. And so I apologize, it wasn't a little bit more, that we didn't spend a little more time and detail on this, but just thought you'd find this interesting. This is just the box return. When we did this up in Canada, we didn't have this nifty little thing. And so it's just extra, extra footsteps, extra labor to walk the boxes, with a dolly over to the other side there. But yeah, so there's this. That is a beautiful piece of equipment, a Hummer-B forklift. We're actually looking at getting one of those next year. So here's the uncapper here. It has oscillating knives that are also heated. I don't know if you can kind of see the red tube here, which I didn't ask Juan. It's either steam or hot water, probably hot water heated. And so it goes through there. It uncaps most of the comb, as you can see. But if the frame isn't perfect, if the comb isn't perfectly, if there's any kind of indentation or something, it can miss. And so he's got a little scraper in his hand, and that's what I'm pointing at. A little scraper in his hand, and that's what he's watching for down the line here. And then as those frames line up, this actually, let me go back here just a hair. This here is actually a pneumatically powered arm as well that'll come back, and it'll grab 30 frames. I'm sorry, 30 frames at a time. And those 30 frames at a time will get pushed into the extractor. And then after they're extracted, it takes about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. They're pushed back out here. And then as you can see, she's putting the frames back in the boxes. This unit here is what we use to separate the wax from the honey. One thing that's really nice and efficient about these whole Callan extracting lines, Cooks and Beal is the other really big industry player that makes commercial extracting equipment. They're both really great companies. You'll have an auger that takes all of the honey that's dripping off of these frames that are ready to go into the extractor. You'll have an auger that brings all that honey and wax cappings and merges it with the honey that actually is being extracted as well. And then it all gets pumped into this machine. And this machine has a rotating cylinder in it that is, you can see the shaft here. It's a rotating cylinder with a fine mesh on the outsides here. And so the centrifugal force drives the honey through the screen, but the wax remains. And then this little unit here is what a knife is attached to it. Almost looks more like a big commercial sized box cutter. And what we do is we adjust that to shave the wax off of that spinning drum. Obviously, the thicker you allow the wax to get on there, the longer it's also going to take for that honey to spin out. But there's also a happy medium there because uh, the more wax that's building up on there, it's also going to there's a happy medium of getting the wax and honey, or the honey separated from the wax efficiently. But as that blade cuts the wax off of that bin, it comes off in little flakes like that, and then we just put that into another 55-gallon barrel and fill those up. So, anyways, that's just kind of a little nifty setup, and we'll post that on YouTube a little bit later. But it's interesting. I mean, it's always fascinating to. It's an absolutely great feeling when you have honey to extract. And this year, we found for us to be a little bit better than average, and kind of be interested actually to hear from some of you on what your guys' years are looking like so far. Real quick too, want to make mention, this is a brag moment, and that is this month's edition of the American Bee Journal by Dadant features an article by me, and it's really, actually, I mean, this has kind of been one of those little bucket list items that I was wanting to do, and the title of it is "Success Starts with Attitude." But anyways, that's in the August edition of the American Bee Journal. I was very honored that they asked me to be a part of that and do that, and they were very liberal with giving me, I think it was about five pages worth of space to write the article. And really what the article is dealing with is just practical business knowledge. There's a lot of people who ask me, how do you transition from hobbyist to sideliner, or sideliner to commercial? And it really comes down to business. I mean, the bee management side is obviously very important, but there's certain business principles that definitely increase the likelihood of you having success doing it commercially. But in business, there is definitely no guarantees, but there are things that certainly increase the probability of success. So, okay, let's get to the topic here that we're here for, and that is that, and you guys can all hear me. Someone just wants to give me a thumbs up or something there in the chat. Cool. I got a thumbs up, both in the emoji and in the physical form there. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, so the big thing right now, and it's funny because I was just over in Mattawa earlier today, picking up some of our honey that we got extracted, and I was seeing a lot of hives in people's yards. 1, 2, 3, 5 hives, whatever. And almost all of them still had honey supers on them, which is pretty normal. The only problem is that you're running behind schedule if you still have honey supers on. If any of you still have honey supers on, there's no need to panic. It's just, you want to get those off ASAP and get the mites treated. The other colleagues of mine in the state here finished pulling honey about a week ago. Some of them maybe in the eastern part of the state where you have some later flows might be still waiting a bit, but you really don't want to go beyond the first week of August. And the key reason being is that obviously through the summer, no matter how well you treated for mites in the spring, no matter how clean your bees were, by this time of the year, because of the population density of the hives, as well as the population density of hives in neighboring yards, other people who have bees, the mites, they reach their, they definitely reach their high point at this part of the year. And the bees, after the 21st of June, after the summer solstice, when the days start getting, or daylight starts getting less, the bees instinctively start pulling back on their production and start, or their brood production, and start to, and let me clarify too, if you have a heavy flow, they'll still keep going. It's not really noticeable that they've started pulling back until usually around maybe mid-July or something like that. By this time, you definitely can notice that the population's starting to go down. But what's happening is that the bees are obviously getting ready for the fall and winter. And these are still the summer bees. And so those summer bees will have a large density of viral issues that just come from the mites. And so the reason you're really wanting to get those mites knocked down now and not any later is because you want to make sure that when the bees that are going to make up the winter clusters start hatching, which is usually about end of August into September, October, you want to make sure that by the time those larvae are laid, being larvae and getting ready to hatch, that the mites have been cleaned up as much as possible in the hive so that there is minimal viral exposure to the bees that are going to make up your winter cluster. And that is easily the biggest takeaway from this whole talk is just remember, you don't want to treat for mites any later than the first week of August. Even if you have an incredible honey flow, I mean, for us, we started pulling honey, even though we probably still had about a week left. I'm willing to sacrifice that. I am willing to sacrifice that profit gladly for us to be able to get on top of our mites, because in the long run and in the long term, it's going to be well worth a little bit of sacrifice of a little extra honey. And so once again, the treatment that I recommend is Apivar. I feel at this point that I should be getting endorsements just simply because, I am all for rotating treatments. The problem is that in order for us to rotate treatments effectively and efficiently, we need more than one or two treatments that work consistently well. And we're struggling with seeing that a lot in the industry. Formic acid is certainly a strong contender, has a very good track record. It's in the retail name of Mite Away Quick Strips. You probably heard for Formic Pro, I think it's Formic Pro now they're calling it. It's supposed to be newly formulated, but still, it's a good product. The other one, obviously, oxalic acid. And we've talked about this before, is that the reason I say Apivar right now is because Apivar seems to have, I know in our operation, we wouldn't have an operation if it wasn't for it. In our operation, the Apivar we use this time of the year because it's the most consistently reliable. And this is one of the most crucial times for us to make sure that we have a really good mite knockdown. So we do Apivar, and then what we do is do oxalic acid in November, December. And I actually, here, I'm gonna do a little, share the screen here again real quick because I had some people ask me to share our treatment schedule. And so hopefully you can see that. For some reason, there we go. I don't know if you get a good visual. good visual on that. I probably, let me copy it and I'll paste it on the chat too, as soon as I get back to the main thing. But here's our treatment schedule. Obviously, we're right here, you know, July, end of July, first week of August, most important treatment. Once again, beginning of September, depending on mite counts, you know, you can do another treatment. Once again, you know, and that's doing mite counts. I mean, that's something that we could spend 45 minutes, an hour talking about. What I would suggest researching is either using sticky boards for mite counts, or you can get these, trying to remember the name of it right now, the, what's it called? The, it's a little plastic container. I think Varroa mite plastic container, alcohol. I can never remember how to spell alcohol, so we'll do this, alcohol container. Aha, there we go. Dayton Varroa Easy Check. You can get from Dayton or Man Lake. This is really a nifty little setup for doing your alcohol wash. And yeah, 20 bucks. I mean, I think with shipping, everything's probably 25. It's probably on Amazon too, for all you know. But this is a really great way. You can either use rubbing alcohol or actually windshield washer fluid. You can use as well. Just make sure it has alcohol in it. And but anyways, so yeah, so September, and then obviously we deal with the spring treatments. But I really want to just focus on the fall preparation. So big thing, mites, check for mites, pull your honey if you haven't done so already. And we'll actually be doing those nukes that we've been following through a year. The guys purposely left those for me so that I can do a little video and show, you know, because for me, I would use two main ways of pulling honey. The first one being a fume board. We use, it's called Go, which has a horrible smell to it. You actually get used to it, and it actually kind of seems pleasant after a while. But when you're first introduced to it, it is not pleasant. But that's been used for years, and it's, I think, butyric acid is the official chemical compound. But we use that 95% of the time. The other option would be just simply to have a bee brush. If you've just got a handful of hives, you know, just pull the supers and brush the bees off, shake the bees off one frame at a time. And I would highly, especially this time of the year with robbing, I would highly recommend that you have an empty box, empty super with a lid on the bottom so it's sealed, and you can just put one frame in there at a time and put another lid on top while you're shaking off the other frame. That just keeps your bees from robbing, because you should see our yard right now. It is just absolute utter chaos. I mean, there's just bees everywhere, but it's just typical this time of the year. Okay, so Apivar mite treatment schedule, prepping bees. Okay, so the next thing after mites, the next really important thing, and it kind of coincides with the mites, is obviously nutrition. And that includes obviously supplemental feeding of syrup and also pollen sub. And we actually, I'll deal with the pollen sub first. So the reason that we're going to start giving our bees pollen sub around the middle of August, and then we're going to continue to give them sub until probably almost the end of September. Now, the reason we're doing that, because we're going to be giving them like 5-6 pounds of sub per visit, so we don't have to make frequent visits. The reason we're doing that is because we are going to be taking our bees down to California, and so it's very important for us to have large hives in January. If you're just wanting to overwinter your bees and just make sure that they're good and healthy, you probably could just get away with, I would say, feeding 2 or 3 pounds. Same thing, you can feed them probably closer to the end of August. And what that does is that a good quality pollen sub actually allows the winter bees, as they're emerging, to develop fat bodies on themselves, which obviously gives them a nutritional base for themselves in the winter cluster. But here's the magical thing is that the bees that make up that winter cluster use those fat bodies when brood rearing begins again, into late winter, after really the winter, was it the winter solstice, December 21st or whatever, when the days start getting longer again, the bees start ramping up. And so all that fat that the winter bees have go into raising the bees that are going to make up your spring bees. And so that's why it's really important to make sure that they've got a really firm nutritional foundation going into winter. And something that we're doing this year, kind of just experimenting with it. There is a lot of pollen subs out there, and actually the American Bee Journal has a series running by Randy Oliver, which scientificbeekeeping.com. You've heard me talk about him before. Really great guy. Comparing a bunch of different pollen subs, a really interesting article. We've had a few people ask about the pollen sub we use. We use a sub called Nutra B, which I'll type here in the comment section there. And that was developed by Keith Jarrett down in California, probably about 25, 30 years ago. You won't see it in a retail area. He sells it usually only by the pallet, 2,000 pound pallet. And Keith gave me permission. He said, if you want to sell it retail to your customers, you can do that. He's not crazy about it simply because he likes dealing with the larger amounts, which don't let that misinform you of thinking that he doesn't care about people's beekeeping. Keith is just a brilliant beekeeper guy and knows bee nutrition inside and out. And I actually owe him for why we are still in business today, because back about 4 or 5 years ago, we lost over 90% of our colonies. And he actually gave me a lot of guidance. And one of the key things was nutrition. And since we've been using his sub, our bees have never looked better. And so usually he sells it, like I said, in the pallet form. And then the pallets are made up of 50-pound blocks, which we can sell if you need a 50-pound block. But we also just went ahead and pre-packaged a bunch of, let me see here, I'll hold it against my shirt. A bunch of these just 2-pound containers. It's 2 pounds per bag. And they're $5. It's $2.50 a pound. And we've got them pre-packaged here in the store, here in Rochester. If you want more, or if you want bulk, like I said, it comes in 50-pound loaves in that pallet. Just give Chris a call here at the store, and she can get whatever quantity you want. We do have a limited quantity. I picked up, I think it was around 10,000 pounds of it, and we put aside like 800 pounds for retail. The rest are going to our bees. But if you're interested in that, just let us know. Just give the store a call. Here, I'll put the store number too here, just in case you don't. 4978. There we go. But anyway, so yeah, that's the other. So pollen sub, really, really important. And then the other thing too is obviously syrup. And this is another key thing that I've seen a lot of people make the mistake of. And that is, you know, a lot of people, hey, our lives are busy. I totally get that. What bothers me is when people spend a lot of money getting set up in bees and then they keep having their bees die and keep having their bees die, because a lot of times people don't realize just how beekeeping, the basic principles of successful beekeeping are pretty basic, but our timing of when we do those things has become very, very, very precise. We have to be very precise when we do certain things because of just the viral issues that the Varroa mite has just exacerbated and continues to be a vector for. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's just completely changed the landscaping of beekeeping in general worldwide, except for Hawaii and I think Australia or wherever they're still free. New Zealand, I think it is. Anyway, so where was I going with that? Varroa mites, blah blah blah. Oh, yeah. So you get your mites treated. The biggest mistake is people will start getting some cold weather in September or what have you, and people panic and start going out and trying to feed their bees syrup or what have you. Here's the problem is that you're wanting, whenever you're feeding bees syrup, they're having to take that moisture content down to under 18, 19% so that it does not ferment. And so if a person's going out there in the middle of September, end of September, and feeding them a 1 part sugar, 1 part water mixture, depending on what the weather does, a lot of times the bees don't have time to ripen, or so we say ripen the syrup, the same thing, you bring the moisture content down so it doesn't ferment. They don't have the time a lot of times to properly ripen that syrup. And so what happens is it gets cold, they go into their winter cluster, and then all of that excess moisture in that unripened syrup starts to affect the humidity of the hive. Then you have secondary issues of frost if it gets really cold, mold, those type of things. So what we're doing and what we do is we've obviously pulled our honey that ended last week. We're treating for mites, and we also did our first round of feeding for the winter just this last week. And what we're doing is we're feeding them a 2-to-1, a minimum 2-to-1. The thicker the syrup, the better. It actually probably is way more than the 2-to-1. What we actually do is we have these super, or these mega totes. They're 2,200-pound totes of sugar that we empty slowly but surely empty into one of those 250-gallon plastic totes that's half filled with water or a little under. And then we use a trash pump to circulate the water while the sugar is pouring in. And so we're going roughly this time of the year, we're just trying to put as much sugar as can be emulsified into that water to minimize the work that the bees have to do. The other thing too, when you're adding that syrup, is put in for every gallon of syrup that you're feeding your bees, put in a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. That is an incredible health tonic for the bees. The reason being that it helps bring the pH level of the syrup to a point where when the bees ingest it, and when they obviously ripen it and put it in their hive, it helps prevent nosema, which is a spore that can develop in the hind gut of the bees and create dysentery issues in the fall or in the winter time, whenever bees are really under stress. I mean, bees are just like us. You know, if we're under a lot of stress, we get more open to infections and what have you. So apple cider vinegar, 1 or 2 tablespoons per gallon, and that's great. You know, that's so okay. So there's that. Last thing on nutrition, and I see Susan, I see your question there. And I see another question here from Frank, and so I'll get to those here in just a little bit. Can I add the vinegar with honey be healthy? It's a really good question. I would probably reach out to Honey Be Healthy and make sure that there wouldn't be any type of effect. Honey Be Healthy is definitely something I know a lot of guys use. And I would probably just check with them first, see if adding apple cider vinegar would have any effects. But that is a good question. It's just better safe to ask than to have something go wrong. One other thing I'll mention on the nutritional side, we give our bees probiotics. I do want to make mention that Keith has told me that there are probiotics in his pollen sub. We started doing the probiotics at the same time as his sub. And so I guess we're just kind of doing a double dose, if you will. And the company that I use is called Super DFM, and they are out of Milwaukee. And their sales rep, Mary, she is an incredible sales lady, but I will warn you that she is a sales lady. She called me the other day because she wanted to know if I needed any more, and we still have lots to carry us into the spring. But I was telling her we have this Zoom call, and she said, if any of your people want to call me and buy any of the probiotics, she's going to include a free stainless steel hive tool. So it's kind of really neat deal. I would really appreciate, let me just get her information. I would really appreciate if you do decide to reach out to her. Let me know how your experience is, because like I said, I've worked with her and I have nothing but good to say. I will tell you that I worked in sales a lot. I worked in radio and everything and led sales teams and everything. And so I'm very impressed when I see somebody that's good at sales, and she is. But just don't let that set you off. She really loves this product, believes in it, and but I posted her stuff here in the chat. And like I said too, I mean, we've a good friend of mine up in Canada runs around 6,000 colonies. He's actually the one who introduced me to their company. And they swear by it. They said their bees have never looked better since they've started using it. And the only time we use that, we use it maybe 3 times a year. I think they recommend, to use it every month or whatever. But what we do is whenever we feel the bees are going to be under stress. And so when we're pulling honey, hey, 3/4 of their stores are gone. And all of a sudden, it's a stress. So we add probiotic. The next time we do probiotic is actually when we're down in California and the bees are starting to ramp up again, because there's stress in that. There's stress in them getting things going again. So, in our area, if you did this probiotic now and then did it again in the spring, I think that would be more than sufficient. But anyways, yeah, so that's her information there. And then once again, just a reiteration that if you are going to feed your bees syrup, just make sure it's thicker than it is lighter, just so it minimizes the amount of work that the bees have to do in ripening it. And also another question that comes up a lot is, can you use brown sugar? And you do not want to use any other sugar than white sugar. White sugar is absolutely the best. Sucrose, it's just the best for the bees. We may use a mixture when we're buying it in bulk from Seattle that has some high fructose corn syrup in it and some glucose. It's called HFCS55. That's fine too. I mean, that's but at the end of the day, always white sugar. white sugar. Great question, Michael. What about beet sugar? Yeah, as long as it's a white processed white sugar, it doesn't matter if it's from beets or cane, just as long as it's white. For whatever reason, if you have any of the molasses left in it, which obviously is what makes the different types of brown sugar, it creates issues in the digestive system of the bees, and just it sometimes it can work, but it's just one of those risk factors that if you can stay away from it, just stay away from it and just use white sugar. I'm just going to backtrack here to a couple of questions that were mentioned before, and I encourage you at this point. I'm done my babbling here off of my yellow sticky notes, and so love to focus on questions here now. So Frank asked, do you use 2 strips of Apivar per brood box? I have 2 boxes stacked. The only Apivar I could find from Man Lake was a package of 10 strips, which seems like a waste of 6 strips. I agree with you, Frank, and it's an area of frustration for me that this is one of the main products that works consistently, but there doesn't seem to be a movement towards making a package for 2 hives even, or whatever. So yeah, I'm with you on that. But yeah, it's 2 strips per box. So if you're wintering your bees in a double, then you want 4 strips altogether. I want to say, Frank, that the extra strips, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I'm pretty sure that if you take the original package, those extra strips, and maybe double bag them in a really good quality Ziploc bag ×2 and put it in your freezer, it should be okay to use in the spring. It should be, but I'm really going out on a limb saying that the active ingredient that is used in Apivar, if it's packaged and if it's frozen, it doesn't. I can't remember what the proper term is, but it won't evaporate. It won't lose its concentration over a short period of time, like a few months or so, 3-4 months. But good question though. Susan, when should we add pollen here in Olympia area for small home operation? So I would probably watch your bees, just watch even the entrance of the beehives. Are they bringing in pollen? Is it a pretty consistent flow? In your area in Olympia, I mean, it's pretty well the same here. I would say probably around the end of August, beginning of September would be a good time. The reason that we're treating our bees earlier with the pollen sub is because we don't want to lose any momentum as the natural foraging drops off towards the end of August. We want them to continue to have that really high quality protein available to them, so they continue with their brood rearing, and that we go into winter with really strong, healthy clusters. So yeah, I think going into September, even the middle of September, you should be fine. And I would say probably 2 or 3 pounds a hive should set you up in good shape. Key thing that Keith, who's the developer of this, tells guys, because he is one of the leading pollen sub providers in the commercial beekeeping industry. And he has an incredibly good reputation in commercial beekeeping industry. But he will tell people, he said, listen, this is not a magic silver bullet. If you have mite issues and you have viral issues, you can give them the best pollen sub in the world, best probiotics, best syrup, doesn't matter. You're going to have dead bees. So priority number 1, mites, and then good quality supplement. Hardy off gassing. I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you want to clarify it, my mind automatically goes to a bad diet, but anyway. Frank, I was planning that very thing. I understand that there are no guarantees. It has to, yeah, exactly. It's, just get on top of the mites. And then depending upon how deep you want to invest in the hobby, but I think it would be a worthwhile investment. Get one of those $100 vaporizer, oxalic acid vaporizers that you can buy from Dayton, Man Lake, probably on Amazon. And actually, here, let me just show a picture just in case there might be somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about. Let's see. Let's go to the all-knowing Amazon here and see oxalic acid. Whoops. Oh yeah, look, vaporizer for bees, of course. Oh gee, look at this, $50. This one here, $30. That's pretty amazing. Anyways, invest in one of these. And what I would suggest is do a treatment or two of oxalic acid in the around the end of November, beginning of December. Because see, the biggest issue with oxalic acid this time of the year is that you still have a lot of brood that's capped, and oxalic acid does not work, will not kill mites that are under the cappings. So, that's where formic acid is, the mite away quick strips, that does kill mites under the cappings. But we've seen mixed results in our operation using that product during certain times of the year. And so that's why I kind of, I don't recommend it as highly as the Apivar, Apivar one. But yeah, no, as far as end of November, beginning of December, I would definitely recommend do some oxalic acid treatments. That's when they're have the least amount of cap brood, and you can clean up the bees. And then you're also alternating treatments so that if you do have any mites that have any kind of proclivity towards Apivar resistance, which, by the way, Randy Oliver, which is kind of the science guru in the beekeeping industry right now, really good guy, great website, scientificbeekeeping.com, did a study and found really no evidence that that mites were developing resistance to amitraz, which is the active ingredient in Apivar. So, side note. But anyways, that's the word you're looking for regarding the Apivar. Cool. So anyways, any other, actually, you know what, just to save your fingers typing here, we'll do a few more minutes. If somebody has a question, actually, if you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. In the meantime, I'll show off my keeper of the bees coffee mug.
Hey, Kevin, this is Hardy.
Hey, Hardy.
Hey, so great presentation, by the way, man. Love all your videos.
Thanks.
But for future, this is probably the wrong time to talk about it, but I'm a novice. I'm only in my second year, and some of the things I'd love to hear you talk about maybe in the future is things like swarm prevention being one of those.
Sure.
And this year I had almost no honey at all, and I think that's because I probably made some mistakes by not properly feeding early in the spring. Mm-hmm. And letting them build up their 2 brood boxes before I put on a honey super. So those are a couple of subjects maybe for future reference that I think I personally would find helpful.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I don't know if this will make you feel better. It probably will. I was talking with another beekeeper down in Silverton, Oregon, a few days ago. And he was telling me, he says, Yeah, and he's been keeping bees commercially for, I don't know, 30 years or whatever. And he said this year was insane for swarming. He says, I don't know what in the world I've never seen my bees swarm so much. And I told him, I said, I appreciate you saying that, because I said, I was telling my friend, which I mentioned before up in Canada, I was mentioning to him, I said, we had major swarming issues this year. And we were really on top of our bees, but percentage wise, probably 15 to 18% of our hives swarmed, which out of 1,000 hives is, makes up a substantial amount of money hanging in the trees. And like what you said, lost honey production as well. And my friend up in Canada was like, oh, that would be devastating to our operation, which up there, uh, honey production is your main business model, just because of the way the floral is, the farming up there. For us, obviously, our main business model is almonds, almond pollination, and nukes. And then, honey production is kind of one of those things. If it happens, great. If not, we're not relying on that. But anyways, so if that encourages you at all, and we couldn't figure out for the life of us why that was this year. I don't know whether it was the way the weather was in June, where it's kind of be rainy and a little colder, and then it would get hot. I don't know what it was, but yeah, it was a bad year for swarming. And
Yeah, I had 4 hives and all 4 swarmed. So I'm sitting here with 8 of them right now.
well, I'm glad you caught them at least. I mean, for us, it was so funny because the guy that I brought on to do the field management for us, he's been a hobbyist beekeeper for a few years, but really nice guy, and has a lot of background actually from the military. He's retired from the military. Logistics and cost analysis and all that fun stuff. And it was funny because this was his first summer being out in the field with us. And, we go to a yard and there'd be 2 or 3 massive swarms hanging from the trees. And he's saying to me, Kevin, that's like $170 for a nuke. And then he says, and then the projected profit, or I mean, production of that is like, and he's doing these numbers. And I said, I get it, but this year, for whatever reason, and it was a painful year because of that. The bees that were left behind, anyways, that's a whole other thing. I was gonna say, so weird thing is that we would go into and that's why it wasn't that big of a concern too. We go into our yards and we couldn't figure out what hive swarmed, because the bees, I mean, we really wanted to go in depth, we could have, but just from, opening the lids and just doing kind of the assessment that we needed to do, you couldn't usually tell where they came from. The bees looked that good. So that was a good side of it. But anyways, anyone else got a question? And actually, I just forgot here. I got an email from Duncan who said, and by the way, just in case I didn't reiterate already, I'd be more than happy to do a series on that. The goal for next year, this year, we were really fortunate in the growth we experienced with the retail store that we opened, the bees, the way they were looking, and just a bunch of other stuff. My wife and I actually also took over management of another business. And so the thing I love about the people that I'm bringing on board with the bee business is they are forcing me to get more organized and scheduled. And so I was already telling our staff, I said, next year, I really want to aim at us actually having a calendar with the different Zoom calls and the topics that we'll be talking about, so that, just so there's that continual resource for our customers, for people who've bought bees, and just to really maximize the probability of success. Anyway, okay. Duncan, Irie queen to nuke I got from you this spring. Not sure what happened to the queen after the swarm, but they have accepted the nuke queen and she is laying. Here we go, another swarm. The problem is she has no room to lay. The drawn out frames are full of honey and drone cells from when I had a laying worker. I'm looking for some frames that are drawn out and empty so she has some real estate to lay eggs on. I will be on the Zoom meeting tonight. Duncan, are you? Oh yeah, I see you. I just looked up and saw your name. How you doing, Duncan?
Hey, I'm here. Yeah,
Hey.
I got a nuke from you in the spring, and it swarmed up into a tree, and I was able to grab it, and throw it in another box. So I was all happy. I had now two. Somehow, I'm not sure what I did, but I ended up with 2 hives without queens. So I'm sure I got the queen on the swarm because all of a sudden all the bees ran inside the box and they were all happy. I checked on them, a couple weeks later, lots of drones, checked them about another 2 weeks, got nothing but drone cells. Both hives are absolutely packed full of drones. So got a friend, he's got 30 some hives. He came over and looked and said, yep. So I got 2 new queens. They've been in for about a week and accepted, no problem. They're laying, but my hives are full of honey. I have one that's got 2 deeps and they're really heavy with honey. And then the swarm hive is just 1 deep, but it's full of honey. So between the honey and the swarm cell, the drone cells, she's trying to lay, she's doing a really good job of finding the little spots, but there's nowhere for her so I figured, well, and I could spin out one of my, extract one of my honey cells, and that might be the best way to do it. Give her some room. If there's still time, there's still a lot of bees in there.
Yeah.
They're happy.
No, that's actually what thought crossed my mind. Is if you have an extractor or access to one, the other backup plan I had is the gentleman that came over and helped you, see if he's got some, couple of frames or so. Because if you have a really good laying queen, it's always a nice manipulation to take out any of the honey frames along the sides that are just being utilized for honey or pollen, and then drop a really good quality empty frame with drawn out comb, obviously preferred, especially this time of the year, for her to continue to lay. And no, I think that's a great idea. And how many frames of brood would you say on average that you have in both hives at this point?
Oh, 1/4 of 1 frame. They've only been, took them a couple days to get through the candy plug. She's only been laying probably a couple of days.
Got it.
So,
okay.
No, I don't even have one, not even one.
Got it.
But we saw the queen. She's in there. She's laying eggs, moving right along, but she's just really limited. So yeah, I think I do have some frames I could spin the honey out of. I can get a little 2 frame extractor.
I'd suggest you probably want at least four frames for her to be able to, obviously going into fall, winter, it's not as essential, but I definitely want to say a minimum of four frames that she has access to that she can lay on.
Okay, that's 4 frames per hive.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have scrounged up a couple of drawn out, but he only has a couple of them. So I put those in and spin out a couple of the ones that are full of honey. I have an unbelievable amount of honey. That's not the problem.
Yeah.
But lots and lots of drones.
Yeah. No, it was a good year for honey production. If we hadn't got that one big heat wave and actually gotten a little bit of rain, kind of the building the perfect, what would have been the perfect year. I think it could have been easily a bumper crop. But from what we got, we're actually really, really happy with it. In the Midwest, we're actually expecting honey prices, bulk honey prices already have gone up by about 50 cents a pound, which is really significant. I mean, just to give you an idea, honey, this is a whole other topic. Honey for the last several years has hovered around $2 a pound to producers. This year it's around 248, 250, which, you know, obviously for a lot of operations is a very significant increase. And so anyway, no, appreciate your question, Duncan, and yeah, and good luck, and feel free to, you know, stay in touch via email as well, and just let me know. But yeah, that's a really good question. Got 5 more. Yeah, no, thank you. Got 5 more minutes here, and then we'll close it out at the top of the hour. But is there anyone else that has, you know, that's a scrape the drones open. It's actually, you know, Rick, that's a good, it's a good idea. Right now, drones serve no practical purpose. If you scrape them open, they'll remove them. And the other thing too is, you know, obviously the more drone cells you have, the higher probability and breeding grounds for mites. And so, Rick, that's a really good suggestion. Just use a hive tool, or if you've got one of those little hive scraper doohickeys, which let me do this here, tapping scraper real quick. Share a screen real quick. Come on, there we go. Share the screen. These little Amazon, of course. These little things here, these are just great to have on hand, especially if you only have a handful of frames to extract. Just use those to scrape the cappings off of. Okay, let me get back here. Anyone else have one last question before we wrap it up? Cool. Well, hey, guys, thank you so much again for your time. I saw a couple of you there mention your appreciation for this. Thank you. Please continue to give feedback. Shoot me an email. Let me know, because we really want to make sure that we're offering the maximum value for your time when we do these things. And so really, in a nutshell, pull honey, treat for mites, make sure they're fed up good. One closing note that is definitely worth mentioning is your target weight that you're wanting doubles. If you're wintering in 2 doubles, your target weight going into, like, say, end of September, even mid-September, want them to be around 120 pounds. For a single 75, 80 pounds, that's kind of your target. That's your target weight that you're wanting to get them fed up to. So anyway, thank you.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so transitioning from, let's say, like that 2 or 3 to 1 syrup mix to something that is perhaps a solid, when should I consider doing that?
So I would definitely have a goal of feeding them all the syrup they need between now and the end of August, which, I mean, it's plenty of time for them to reach that goal weight. You don't want to have to feed them the candy board or the sugar if you don't have to. I mean, it's just better if they can rely on the stores that they've had time to properly ripen and everything.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I would say anytime after probably mid-September, then you're starting to risk whether they're going to have, because once again, it just comes back to, are they going to have proper weather and temperature, especially during the day, for them to efficiently evaporate the excess moisture. And so, yeah, I would say probably after about mid-September, you're pushing it.
Yeah. Okay. So as long as they have enough on their own, there's no reason to supplement with the solid.
Yeah. No. As long as, and that's the whole thing is, you know, like between the syrup and then the pollen sub, you're giving them all of the nutrition that they need going into the winter. Obviously, it goes without saying the mites. You know, you get the mites out of the way and the viral issues out of the way, and then the syrup and the pollen sub. they'll have all of the nutritional resources necessary to really kick off February, when February, March, when we start seeing like even those little lilies that come up in the yard. As soon as any kind of natural pollen source starts coming in, they kick into high gear, because that's, obviously along with the days getting longer and all that stuff. So anyways, thank you so much. Oh, one other quick here, Rick. When do you typically do the last inspection for the year? We never do. As long as you can crack your bees open and take a look, as long as there's no wind or the wind is minimal and it's above 45 degrees, 45 degrees, there's no harm at all to take a look, open the lid and see. Just know that if you prepared your bees right, you may open the lid and not see anything, and don't get freaked out. The bees start at the bottom and slowly move their way up as they go through their feed or through their stores. So that's perfectly normal. Yeah, and then as far as we'll do another Zoom call as far as prepping them for the winter. We don't bundle our bees up at all. But we'll do another talk about that, because that is a very important topic. Thank you,
Kevin,
guys.
can I ask you a follow-up syrup question?
Go for
The I'm just a little bit confused on feeding for syrup, feeding them syrup in the fall. I get that it needs to be more concentrated, but so I have 3 hives, 2 of which I got from you, and then I had a solid brood break because right after I did Apivar treatment, within 3 days, one hive they took away the queen and dropped her, and then the other hive they decided to kill her and supersede her. So both of them did that at the same time pretty much. So that was pretty hairy. Fortunately, I did catch a swarm out of one of my trees, like a hive that's living in a tree, in a hollow tree, and it's been there for many years. So I think they're good stock.
Good genetic, yeah.
And I was able to steal a lot of brood and everything from them to kind of keep those other 2, requeening and everything. So I had a solid brood break. So I kind of wonder about, it sounds like you always treat on a schedule, but if I had that solid of a brood break, should I consider still leaving my supers on for space, which have nothing in them? I want them to build wax on them. And they also kind of need the space because they're chock full. I have 2 deeps and they're covering all 10 frames in both.
Mhm.
And I've got stores all the way out to the edges. Like I've rotated everything out to move in empty sides and get them all filled up. And so I feel like they're real heavy on stores right now and kind of want to leave them the space
Mhm.
to work still. So is it better for me to test and not treat if I don't need to, or if there's not really mites, or that might be naive of me and just go ahead and treat. And then that also leads to my question of, if I'm really that heavy and that chock full, am I going to need to feed syrup this fall?
Do you, so usually what we do is we'll tip the hive, and
Mhm.
because we do it so much, we kind of have a feel.
You have a feel for it.
Yeah, and I've used the reference point that, if you tip your hive and it feels like a rock, I mean,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
probably right where it needs to be weight-wise. And do you have any idea what the weight is of the?
I had a very hard time lifting them.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not a wimpy girl. It's a farm girl, life I live.
It's funny because the gentleman that we hired here has a 15-year-old son, and real, loves working. And he went out and he could not lift the deeps, like the full deeps. He just could not do it. And they're heavy. It sounds like they probably have good stores. I would just probably check in with them again, like mid August or whatever else.
Yeah.
Just make sure they're still looking good.
And I know that their favorite things are trees, and bigger crops and fields. I have more than 1,000 dahlias in the ground, and they stay in bloom through October till the freeze. And so I kind of in my mind feel like I'm giving them something to eat in the fall.
Sure.
Is that a legitimate thought, or is that like not anywhere near enough for bees to sustain? And my lawn's turned into clover too.
Well, no, I mean, bees are it's kind of a weird relationship that we have with them, because on one hand, they are kind of still a wild animal
Mhm.
in the sense of they can take care of themselves to a certain extent, but at the same time, whether for good or bad, they've also developed a dependency on us being involved.
Right.
It's a weird relationship, you know. And so I think really, again, it just comes down to the weight.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's nothing that can substitute natural foraging
Mhm.
when it comes to nutritional diversity. And I mean, it's just like us. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care I mean, I use this Shakeology dense sleep pack whatever they call it.
Mhm.
And, you know, as much as I'm sure that's great, I like it. I can't imagine it being good if I had it every meal, you know. So I mean, it's sort of the
Right.
whole diversity thing. Getting back to the mite issue, it's I I personally would treat, just simply because the what's the terminology, the room for error on
Right.
that has just gotten so ridiculously
I guess
small.
I'm nervous because of the queens being killed shortly after I treated
Yeah,
last time.
yeah, no,
And I'm just like so nervous to
well, and
harm them.
that's the thing too, that, you know, because same thing with formic acid. You know, formic acid, you always have that risk of them killing the queen.
Mhm.
Um, you know, anytime you're introducing strong, you know, chemicals, even if
Yeah.
they're organic chemicals, the bees can do weird things. And so, yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for being a bit gun
Yeah.
shy, for it. And it's sort of I guess, you know, it's one of those things that there is that risk, but there's also the risk of probably losing them anyways if you don't treat them, I
Right.
guess,
Yeah.
is really what it comes down to. And so, yeah, I would
Yeah.
probably just go ahead and treat them. I would keep an eye, though, on the stock that you got from that tree,
Mhm.
because if that is actually an ongoing generational,
Mhm.
uh,
I've
that
seen it the last 3 years in a row. I mean, that every year I had noticed it.
that's the you know, for our industry, that is the long-term play. That
Mhm.
has to be the long-term play. Is, you know, the chemical treatments has to be a short span compared to what we can do genetically. And
Mhm.
you know, because the Asian honeybee has developed a ability
Right.
to, you know, coexist with I mean, the Asian form honeybee
Right.
definitely has some different behavioral things that we
Mhm.
wouldn't find necessarily as appealing, but it is possible, you know. And so yeah, so I would definitely keep an eye on that. And yeah, you know, good luck.
Yeah.
It's there's always learning, that's for sure. Well, because
Yeah.
it's like
It's like an ongoing science experiment.
this whole swarming issue. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me feel stupid that I have no idea. It's encouraging that I have other guys I'm talking to are equally mystified by it. But because I mean, we bought a breeder queen from a great guy, Joe Latshaw, and we had great breeding or mating weather and everything, but a very low success rate with our queen cells that we used. And I heard a lot from people too that were having supersedure issues.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was just a very weird year, and I can't say I have a really good answer for it at
Yeah.
this point.
I definitely went through the ringer with, I knew I had a virgin queen, and then I'm pretty sure she didn't come back mated. So then I had to steal more eggs, a frame of eggs and larvae from my swarm hive
Mm.
to try and, requeen that hive. Both hives, I had to do basically 2 rounds
And
to
that
try
worked.
and salvage. And it worked. I saved them both.
Good, good,
So
good. Oh, so you have the genetics from that
I
wild
think so.
sperm.
I do think so. Yeah.
That's awesome. That
We'll see. It'll be
well,
fun.
well, I was gonna say too, if if you get time, let me know. Like, let me know how they're
Yeah,
doing,
for
and
sure.
because that's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Like with most things in beekeeping, I mean, you can spend your lifetime perfecting this little area. And
Right.
bee genetics is one of those areas that fascinates me. But at the same time, I mean, compared to like this Joe Latshaw, I mean, it's his doctorate degree in entomology and honeybee genetics.
Oh yeah, I could see how you could end up doing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so easy because they're so fascinating. I mean, they're so fascinating. They're so complex in what they do and the things they produce. It's just, they're amazing little creatures.
Yep, I love them.
But does that help?
It does a ton.
Okay, yeah, no, appreciate the question, and you'll look forward to hearing more
Yes.
about that
Keep me
wild
posted.
swarm, because I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be
But
fun.
anyway, thank
Thanks,
you guys.
Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Thank you guys all again for your time, and we'll catch you again. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Bye bye.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.